Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos on war, resilience and strategic marketing. My name is Dr. Maitland Hislop. I'm an author, a non-executive director, a chartered marketer of 25 years standing and an academic. Over the last 50 years I've been part of the armed services. I've worked in government organisations, small, medium and large, private sector organisations, small, medium, large, and academia. From my personal perspective, the most difficult environment of those in which to operate is the private sector in an international environment. This video is about what's going to happen to you from the 1st of January 2021. It's not specifically about Brexit, it's about the things which are likely to face you as you move into this uncharted territory. Chris Donnelly of the Institute of Statecraft has said that we've had a holiday from reality over the last 70 years, which is basically since the end of the Second World War. Over that period, Western democracy, Western liberal ideas, Western business has dominated the world. But recently that has changed, and no longer is there some sort of Western hegemony over the world. It's been challenged by China, the BRIC countries, and there have been divisions occurring within the West itself. This has been encouraged by people or countries, people like Putin and Xi, but and countries like Russia, China, North Korea, who have launched different types of warfare against the West over the last few years. Warfare can no longer be defined by the military alone. We see cyber attacks, we see finance attacks, we see sovereign wealth attacks, we see all sorts of different vectors coming to bear to disable or defeat countries which we've never seen before. I'll cover this in a future video on modern agile conflict, but 6 years ago I wrote a book called Obstructive Marketing, and this is available from Gower, Routledge, and this is all about restricting the distribution of products and services in an age of asymmetric warfare. Now, don't worry about the term asymmetric warfare, but concentrate on the restriction of the distribution of products and services. Out there, beyond the European Union, of which we've been a member for the best end of those 70 years, are a whole group of people who don't want you to do the sorts of things that you want to do in an international environment. So I've spent some time over the last decade looking at what those things are, and the book is partly the result of that, and I've concentrated these down for the purpose of this video into something I call the 8 C's. Now, the first of the 8 C's is about casual sabotage, the second is about competition, the third is about crime, the fourth about culture, the fifth about critical infrastructures, the sixth about capital, and the last two, which I've introduced for this video alone because of Brexit, is chaos and change. So just starting with the last one first for a moment, and just to make a comment on that, it's the fact that 80% of you will face some form of weakness which you haven't faced before from the 1st of January. And that weakness is probably going to be something that you haven't thought about or catered for. So please spend the time up until, the remaining time up until the 1st of January thinking about it, because from all the data at this particular juncture of moving into an unknown period of time where where there's no research, no background to what's going to happen, it is virtually guaranteed that 80% of you are going to suffer some form of damage from one or more of these 8 C's in particular. So change, the management of change, is the important thing to concentrate on, because there will be clearly known unknowns and unknowns to face from the 1st of January, and you should be thinking about exactly what those are and preparing yourself and your staff to face them. But let's go back for a moment to Brexit. Just a brief comment on Brexit. I'm sure you're as frustrated as I am by the nature in which this government has prepared the country for an event, for such a momentous event. I don't want to delve too much into it, but I just want to make comments on deal, no deal, Australian deals and Canadian deals. Whether we get a deal or not at such a late stage is probably irrelevant, because you haven't got time to prepare yourself for it by the 1st of January. The same is true of no deal. Australian deals is a red herring, if you like, largely because although Australia has been negotiating with the European Union for many years, it hasn't actually signed a deal yet. It's likely to, but it hasn't actually happened. In terms of Canada, although that has been agreed with the European Union, not all the member states have signed up to the Canadian deal yet. So that is not a deal yet either. So in all of the circumstances that have been discussed over the last few months, there's nothing really substantive behind any of them. So you are very much on your own, despite the exhortations to you to get your house in order by the end of the year, and you're on your own in an environment where you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But the things you're going to face from the 1st of January can be categorised. Let's look at the casual issue first, the first of our 8. The casual problem it used to be something like Perrier employee dropping a benzene rag onto the production line and causing chaos in the downstream supply line. That's pretty unlikely these days because most of that's been tightened up, but it's still a possibility. More likely is the finance director getting some software program wrong and losing a large amount of money as we move across the boundary into 2021, maybe getting some banking arrangements wrong, buying or dealing in derivatives that they shouldn't be dealing in. These sorts of things are the more likely casual damage done to an organisation these days. And of course, as you move into this new environment, then the likelihood of those things happening increases. The second issue is the competitive issue. And there are 3 points I want to make on the competitive issue. The first one of which is something that I'm sure many of you will remember from the 70s, when British produce was sent to France, particularly vegetables, and left to rot on the dockside, waiting for inspection. And there are 2 things that are going to happen from the 1st of January, and that's inspection and regulation. And that sort of anecdote being the first point. The second point is inspections are going to happen, so you have to be prepared for them. And you need to make sure that the people who are representing you on the other side of the water know exactly how they're going to deal with those on the French side who will say no, as they did for the best end of 20 years after we joined the Europeans in the first place. And this is a reality you have to face. The second reality is one of regulation, particularly product regulation. In a similar timescale, TUV took precedence over all other regulatory bodies. And whatever the agreement reached between Britain and the European Union on product regulation is going to be formally, informally, we're going to face difficulties. we're going to face difficulties in the European Union, and we're also going to face issues abroad. The third issue I want to deal with is crime. And here we have the issues of internal crime and issues of external crime. Now, the internal criminal issues are going to arise because of the huge amount of unemployment. I haven't actually mentioned COVID-19 just yet, and it's not really particularly relevant to this video, but what it has done is caused a large amount of unemployment. That unemployment will be compounded by Brexit and the consequences of Brexit. And you need to understand that the level of crime in this country is likely to rise in 2021. That puts your organisation under threat, and you need to understand which bits of your organisation are likely to be vulnerable to crime. Externally, crime is also going to be a problem. But unfortunately, because of the way in which we've conducted ourselves over the last 4 years, we're not going to have access to all the relevant crime databases in Europe, and therefore will not know some of the things we know now about international crime. So you need to be aware of that too, because that will have an impact on how your products and services are distributed abroad. The fourth point I want to talk about is culture. This is a complicated issue, culture. You know, what makes Britain British? You know, it's a bit like icons, which we'll talk about in a moment. What makes British British? Now, Britain has not made many friends over the last 4 years. And not only have we upset the Europeans, we have upset the United States, we've upset Russia, China, large swathes of Asia, India, Australia, you name it. There's hardly a country on any continent that we haven't upset somewhere along the line over the last 4 years, breaking international law notwithstanding. So our cultural specialness or exceptionalism, which we once took as being a very great positive in operations in the international environment, is no longer there. You cannot assume, in fact quite the reverse, that being British is helpful. So culture is a big issue. Culture has an impact on other things as well, like investment, but we'll come to that in a moment. The next C is critical infrastructures. And here there's a list of things which are going on, which we also need to pay attention to. The first one is energy. And although energy supply is not the threat that it was 10 years ago, because wind in particular has come on stream, we've got better gas storage, there are still some threats from the reduction in supply from Europe, for example, that could impact on UK product and service delivery. So energy is the first point. The second in this heading. The second one is food, and this is far more of an issue. There's no doubt, as the chairman of Tesco said the other day, that from the 1st of January, food supplies will be A, more vulnerable, and B, more expensive. So your individual food bill is going to go up, but more importantly, if you're involved in the production and delivery of those sorts of products, then life is going to change fundamentally. If you're a farmer, for example, I still have no understanding of how you're going to operate in this new environment, and I don't think you do either. So food consumption is going to be more expensive, food production is going to be riskier, and food in particular from a farming perspective in this country is it's unclear what the strategy is. The next one is law and order. In this critical infrastructure subsection, law and order, we've already touched on this in crime, but law and order is going to be difficult for all sorts of reasons. We're divorced and disconnected from an interconnected law and order environment in Europe. Now, whether you like it or not, the European Court of Justice and all the adjuncts to that that we've signed up for over the last 30 or 40 years has given some stability on how the laws are applied across the major area in which we trade. That has now gone. So, to put it at its simplest, we're now operating in the Wild West. Probably enough said. Manufacturing is the next critical infrastructure, and here we have some major difficulties. We've already heard recently in the last few days that INEOS will take their Grenadier production to France and not in Wales. And investments like the battery plant in Blyth notwithstanding, there are threats to the big manufacturing industries of this country. And those threats are daily recorded in the media. How are the major car companies going to survive over the long term? How is foreign direct investment into this country going to be affected? It was attracted to Britain in the past because it was seen as a springboard, an English-speaking springboard in the main, English being important, into the European Union, where relatively low labour rates and a flexible market prevailed in order to help investors enter the European market. That's gone. It's unlikely that we will see such large foreign direct investments in the future. Many of those were directed towards manufacture. Every job created in manufacturing generates 75 jobs in the supply chain and elsewhere in the community. It is devastating to lose a manufacturing operation in terms of the knock-on effect on jobs. 7.5 times at least more jobs are lost by losing a manufacturing entity than by losing a service entity. Now, you wouldn't think that national icons would be a critical infrastructure, but they are. So, things like Wembley Stadium, fish and chips, all of these things are what are called national icons, and they define a country, and the lack of them diminishes the country. One of the side issues in this context is what's going to happen to the Premier League. The Premier League has depended, along with the success of the European Cups and the international cups, largely on the free movement of labour across Europe. Now that freedom of movement has gone, we're already seeing many of the major stars saying they may not be willing to extend their contracts in the Premier League. So it's not only the manufacturing operations which are going to come under threat, but it's also things like the Premier League. So we may have a less competitive, less profitable, less challenging football environment than we've had to date. Transport, I'm sure you realise, is an important critical infrastructure and one which has been in the news consistently. A friend of mine drives his own truck. He's 62 years old. He's giving up. He said he can't be bothered to wait the amount of time this side of the border or that side of the border to bring goods across the channel. There is no doubt there's going to be some chaos in transport. There's going to be chaos in transport internally, with Kent turned into a car park, externally with Calais turned into a car park. Delays, not just because of the new regulations, but also because our border force is not up to speed. We don't have enough people in our customs organisations just yet to do the job they're going to be expected to do from the 1st of January. The last critical infrastructure is water and wastewater, but I don't really want to comment on that because probably from a water perspective for the moment we're okay. The last of the 6 C's, which I started with, is capital. Access to capital is important. The country's broke, but for the meantime interest rates are low. We've just had a drop in, I think it was Moody's rating for the country by a notch, and as we spend more and more money on the pandemic and more money on the on Brexit, then our ratings are likely to drop further, so the access to capital is likely to be more expensive. At the same time, we've had a COVID epidemic. We've also had a credit crunch and a corporate debt crunch. And I would anticipate that the cost to business of borrowing money for those two reasons, never mind COVID, will rise after the 1st of January in Britain, because that's what has to happen. We don't have the benefits, the low risk nature of business that we had before, so costs obviously will go up. So your cost of capital is going to rise as from the 1st of January. And let's leave it at that for this video. There were two other C's that I introduced as part of the thinking for this video. The first one is what I would call chaos. We have chaos. The government is chaotic. In 2010, 11, the coalition government had the idea that it could gather together the leading British companies and encourage them to do better and more, both nationally and internationally. And I remember having a very strong argument with Lord Heseltine, who was the business czar at the time, and I was running a local enterprise partnership. When I said, well, no, this is not the Thatcher years when you had golden shares in Shell, BP, or British Leyland, or the railways. You can't tell these people what to do. And not only that, 60% of them are foreign. And 60% of the businesses in this country remain foreign. So not only do we have a chaotic government that doesn't understand business, we have a government which still thinks that there are businesses out there that it can corral to do its bidding, when actually most of them and most of our employment is owned by foreigners, 60% plus now. So the whole system is chaos. At a strategic level, at an operational level, it's equally chaos. The chaos at the ports, the chaos in the border force, the chaos in the customs units, the sort of ridiculous advertisements that we see from the government telling you to get prepared versus what Boris Johnson's actually saying on the television. The two just don't meet at all. This is chaos. This chaos is going to go on for months. So hopefully you've prepared somewhat for that. My final C, my 8th C, is change. And we started with that, so we'll end with it. I hope by going through all of these C's you understand the enormity of the change and the threat and the increased risks to your business and the chaos you're going to face from the 1st of January. And I hope very much that you can spend part of the Christmas and New Year preparing to meet those issues as they will undoubtedly unfold from the 1st of January. I thank you very much for watching. The next video in this series will be the start of a number of issues about war. So I hope you will rejoin me in the new year to look at how war is now fought as opposed to how people think it's fought, and look at resilience and strategic marketing as we move into this brand new environment. Thanks again for watching. You can subscribe at the bottom, and there will be some additional information posted with the video. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye.